Hey guys, in this video we're gonna go over how to play Anjo in her new follow-up attack team together with Baunaa, Flutterpage and Fatutu. In order for us to understand how to play this team accordingly, we have to take a look at Baunaa first. When Baunaa enters the battle, the maximum amount of number of planets of Saturn are already accumulated. Now every time we would cast an incantation, a planet would be consumed and another planet would be created. If we use our incantation number 1, we create a planet of Saturn. If we would use our incantation number 2 instead, we would create a planet of Mars. We want to accumulate and consume as many planets of Saturn as we possibly can, because every time we would consume a planet of Saturn, we would grant ourselves critical hit rate and penetration rate. In comparison, if we would instead consume planets of Mars, we would grant ourselves damage bonus and leech rate. Critical hit rate and penetration rate are much more beneficial stats for us, so that is why we focus on creating and consuming the planets of Saturn by using our incantation number 1. Using our incantation number 2 is very situational and should, if possible, be avoided. There is of course a little bit more to this, because when it comes to Baunaa using her ultimate, she will create planets of full moon and consume those then whenever she would move on to keep using her incantations. More about these full moons though once we are actually in battle. Alright, then next up we of course have to take a look into Anjo herself, and the most important information to take away here is that you will of course bind yourself to Baunaa. Now every time Baunaa would cast an extra action, which she is all about, Anjo would accumulate a stack of a buff called Harmonic Tapestry. You want to aim at stacking this buff up 8 times as fast as you possibly can, because that would lead to your ultimate no longer consuming AP, and it wouldn't take up the incantation draw limit of your team either. Plus, the most important part is that casting your ultimate would give you 2 Moxie back instead of just 1. Additionally, we have to take a look into her incantations as well, because there is something very important to take away here. If we look at her incantation number 2, which is a channel called Him, she will enter this channeling status for 7 rounds. And after those 7 rounds would be concluded, aka the channel would end, she would cast a very powerful mass attack called Angel's Temptation. That is also something that you want to accomplish as fast as possible and as much as you possibly can. Now, when casting this incantation, if Anjo is already channeling, then you would reduce the duration of this channel by 1, which means you want to cast this channel incantation as much as you possibly can. Additionally, if you aim to rank up one of your incantations, this channel incantation is the one, because you can see at rank 2 it reduces the channeling rounds by 2 rounds instead of just 1, and at rank 3 it reduces the channeling duration by 3 rounds. So that is something very important and something that you should definitely keep in mind. Then her incantation number 1 is a debuff that deals mental damage, and it inflicts a debuff that can stack up. If you stack this debuff up to 3 times, you would stun your opponent. Also something very important. Make sure that you always cast this debuff onto the same opponent over and over again to actually accomplish stunning someone or something, I should say. Alright, and if Anjo is channeling, you reduce this channeling duration by 1 round, plus for every type of debuff onto your opponents, this attack will deal an additional 40% mental damage, right? As we figured, this debuff incantation applies a debuff already, so 40% damage plus is pretty much guaranteed. And you of course want to accumulate as much Moxie as fast as possible with Anjo Nala, because not only would she use her ultimate, but whenever she uses her ultimate, Kaalaa Baunaa also uses her ultimate. That is something that you want to accomplish as fast as possible. And here, with this debuff, aside from dealing quite a significant amount of damage, also applies 2 random debuffs out of this collection right here to your enemy, which then in turn leads to, of course, everything dealing more damage, because this attack, this ultimate, also deals an additional 60% mental damage based on how many debuffs are applied to your opponents. And that's it for Anjo Nala. I will of course explain things way further once we are in battle. Let me mention one thing when it comes to Kaalaa Baunaa really quick, because if we look into the best in slot Psychube for Kaalaa Baunaa, it is the one for the signature Psychube for GU Nyangje. And what it does is, if the carrier launches a 1 target attack through an extra action, critical damage would be increased, and this can stack up to 10 times, and at 10 stacks we will gain critical hit rate, right? This is also something very important, because remember that I told you want to use her incantation number 1 as much as possible. And this is actually a 1 target attack that would lead you to perform another 1 target attack as an extra action, and therefore you would not only stack up on the penetration rate and the critical hit rate from consuming the planets of Saturn, but you would also accumulate stacks as well for the Psychube that you carry. So do it over and over and over again. By casting your incantation number 1, you accomplish 3 things. You consume planets of Saturn, which increases your stats. You stack your Psychube up, which increases your stats, and all of this gives you critical hit rate, by the way, so this is pretty significant and pretty huge when it comes to ramping up. Plus, every time you use your incantation number 1, remember, now thanks to your Euphoria update, you will perform a 1 target extra action, and that would lead to Anjo Nala also getting stacks of a buff that she wants 8 stacks for, because then her ultimate becomes more effective. With all of this being out of the way, we can now hop into battle and see how things actually play out in action. This is the very first screen that you will be hit with, and you bind yourself to Kaalaa Baunaa. Now you know that if you play a team that has Flutter Page in it, you want to accumulate 5 Moxie with her immediately. We already have 2 accumulated, so how do we get our hands onto the next 3? It's very simple. You move 1 incantation with her, and now you're gonna use 2 incantations with Flutter Page that you will always have available at the very beginning of the turn. This stage is super annoying as it freezes one of my incantations here, so I would not be able to use 2 incantations with Flutter Page. No problem, I can just move my incantation that I have available 1 more time, then use it, and tada, I have now 5 Moxie accumulated with Flutter Page and can start channeling her ultimate from the very next turn onwards. The other very important thing that you have to keep in mind, and always do on your very first turn every single time, is start channeling with Anjo Nala. Now, next turn, the highest priority that you always have is of course using the ultimate with Flutter Page, needless to explain. But you also want to make sure to use Anjo Nala always as much as you possibly can. Preferably, you want to use her channel incantation as much as possible. And how you accomplish that is via the unfinished tune. Accumulate as much channel incantations with Anjo Nala as you possibly can, always. Then you're gonna start channeling with Flutter Page as well, and you're gonna keep using Anjo Nala as much as you possibly can to accumulate more and more Moxie as fast as possible. Now, if you wouldn't have so many incantations available with Anjo Nala, you would then of course use Kaalaa Baunaa with an emphasis onto her incantation number 1 to consume the planets of Saturn and accumulate new planets of Saturn. Of course, that would also trigger the follow-up attack for Kaalaa Baunaa, and that would give Anjo other things that I explained earlier that she also needs, right? But the most important thing is to accumulate Moxie with Anjo. That is the most important thing. And now you can see, right? We don't have the channel incantation available with Anjo. So we want to use our unfinished toon again to accumulate that. Why? Let me show you why. Because our channeling is still not ready, right? Yeah, we got a little bit lucky and we had it twice last turn. So this time we have only one round left and therefore we don't need to use our unfinished toon necessarily. But yeah, that is something very important still to keep in mind. And you can see we have nothing to do with Anjo this turn. And that is when and why we would use as many incantation number 1 with Kaalaa Baunaa, right? Needless to explain at this point. You can now see that our team is a little bit lower on HP, and that's why we of course use Fatutu, right? That has a higher priority than using the incantation number 2 for Kaalaa Baunaa in our case. But if you, let's say I wouldn't need to heal myself right now, then I would of course still use the incantation number 2 with Kaalaa Baunaa to absorb and create new planets, right? Even if I say, hey, don't use this incantation number 2 and avoid it as much as you possibly can, that doesn't mean never use it. You of course have to use it sometimes. But if it's avoidable, avoid it. Because you do not want to consume and accumulate planets of Mars. It always has to be Saturn, because it gives you more and better start increases.
Tried it. Still afloat. Tried it. Hope I remember. Lost it. That was close. Hope I remember. Lost it. That was close.
And yeah, then it is the typical follow-up attack thing of everyone is going completely nuts. By the way, if you have this new gorgeous advanced garment for Anjo, everything that is happening here will look much cooler. So if you can afford it, definitely buy it. Okay, yeah, now we have unlocked our ultimates, and yeah, things get a little bit more interesting. First of all, I have to show you that if you would now use the ultimate with Anjo, you would not be able to use the incantations for Kaalaa Baunaa or Anjo respectively. So you always want to use this ultimate at the very end of your turn, never at the beginning, right? Channel the incantation with Anjo, use her debuff as much as you possibly can. This has a higher priority than using the incantation number 1 with Kaalaa Baunaa, so that is what we're gonna do right now. Again, let me say that, let me repeat it. If you would not have so many incantations available with Anjo right now, you then would of course use the incantation number 1 for Kaalaa Baunaa, right? Needless to explain. And now you will see, since Anjo, uses her ultimate right now, Kaalaa Baunaa will also use her ultimate. You can see that Kaalaa Baunaa has 3 planets of Saturn accumulated. That is perfect, because by using Kaalaa Baunaa's ultimate, all of the available planets will be consumed, and we get 2 full moon planets instead. So next round, our highest priority is actually to consume these planets of full moon. That has a higher priority than anything else would have. Even higher priority than using incantations with Anjo again. How do you consume these planets? It's very simple, right? You know that. Simply use incantations. Which incantations you want to use? This is always the incantation number 1. Why? Because it accumulates planets of Saturn and not planets of Mars. Easy as that. So our highest priority is, as I said, to consume these 2 full moons. So that is what we're gonna do. And how we're gonna do this is, of course, using her incantation number 1, right? Needless to explain. Now we can use an incantation with Anjo. We use the debuff incantation, use her ultimate, that doesn't consume AP because the channel is still counts as being completed. And then we can do whatever we want, which would be, in this case, using Fatutu to heal ourselves a little bit, or yeah, use her ultimate, right? And that was it. That is how you play the follow-up attack team based around Anjo and Kaalaa Baunaa. Right now, you know. Once, of course, Brumi releases, I will make another video covering how to play Anjo together with Brumi and Sharon, of course, as well. But, you know, that is all about it. The highest priority is always to use Anjo as much as possible, and after you use your ultimate, you gotta consume these full moons with Kaalaa Baunaa. And then you simply repeat the cycle. Unlock Anjo ultimate over and over and over and over again. Consume the full moons with Kaalaa Baunaa over and over and over again. And that's about it, right? Put an emphasis onto Kaalaa Baunaa's incantation number 1. And if possible, if you have enough stuff to use with Anjo, or you even need to heal yourself a little bit with Fatutu, then you can avoid using the incantation number 2 for Kaalaa Baunaa. But yeah, if there is nothing other than the incantation number 2 for Kaalaa Baunaa to use, because you don't need heal, you don't have incantations with Anjo, then you can of course go ahead and use that. But that's it. We can take a little bit of a look into Anjo's signature Psychube here real quick and talk a little bit about the resonances. Anjo uses her signature Psychube, of course, called Transcendent Love. And this gives her critical hit rate, critical damage, and a little bit of damage bonus to Kaalaa Baunaa as well. Kaalaa Baunaa's resonance is a little bit tricky, because you have to know that every time Kaalaa Baunaa removes a planet via her incantation or ultimate, she triggers one of her incantations. She casts it again. And that's why you want to gain as much incantation might out of your resonance as you possibly can. Let me show you why I say it is actually tricky. Because it is not very often the case, but you always have to watch out that if we talk about a Euphoria update, the recommended piece here is not the actual piece. You don't want the piece with ultimate might, but you want the piece, as I just explained, with incantation might. So this is the one that you're gonna unlock and not the recommended one. We accumulate a lot of critical rate already by stacking up our Psychubes, by consuming these planets of Saturn. We gain a whole bunch of attacks out, right? Again, by consuming these planets of Saturn that will trigger our incantations to be cast non-stop all over the field. So the resonance that I found to be the most effective is the one that focused the most on stacking up critical hit rate as much as possible and sprinkling in some critical damage there as well. So if you want to use the same resonance as I do, I will leave a link to this one right here in the description down below. For Anjo, it is pretty much the exact same story as for Kaalaa Baunaa, just this time with an aspirational piece to put a little bit more emphasis onto actual critical damage instead of critical hit rate. But yeah, if you want to use this resonance code here as well, I will also leave a link to that one in the description down below. And that's it for the video, guys. I hope that was fun and informative. If you like Reverse1999 content in general, please consider leaving a follow on my channel. I would really appreciate it. But until next time, take care of yourselves. Don't forget to join the Discord server. Link to that also in the description down below. Take care of yourselves, have a great day, and we love this game.